On March 3, 1991, in the small fading town of Darnell, Georgia, a man named Thomas Caldwell, a quiet high school literature teacher known for his calm voice and strange late-night walks, was led away in handcuffs under a gray dawn sky while neighbors whispered from their porches, and the students who adored him pressed their faces to the bus windows as the news spread like a sudden storm, and nobody could explain exactly why. The official charge was vague, something about tampering with school records and obstruction, but the rumors that followed were stranger, darker, something about hidden files, about a student who vanished for weeks and came back unable to remember anything, and about Caldwell's key that opened a basement room no one had known existed under the old east wing of the school, a place sealed since the 50s, when the building served as a federal holding site during the Cold War. Time passed. The school board denied any wrongdoing. Caldwell was convicted on paper-thin evidence, and he disappeared into the prison system while the town moved on, or pretended to, until decades later, when the old school was scheduled for demolition and workers, with rusted shovels, struck metal deep in the dirt near the old east wing and uncovered a narrow reinforced hatch leading down into a chamber that smelled of old chemicals and chalk dust, where they found rows of filing cabinets and a desk with a small locked box and a stack of brittle notebooks, each labeled with initials and dates from the late 80s, and one of those initials matched the name of Daniel Price, a student who dropped out suddenly that year and whose family had left town without explanation. The sheriff's department sealed the site, but someone leaked photos online. Grainy images of a rusted teacher's chair bolted to the floor, facing a wall lined with mirrors, and that was enough to bring in Detective Sarah Bennett from Atlanta, a woman in her late 30s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for following threads others ignored, who had recently transferred to smaller cases after burning bridges on a corruption probe, and who carried her own secret grief. Her younger brother Michael had vanished in 1991 on his way home from basketball practice in a neighboring town, a case never solved and dismissed as a runaway. Sarah arrived in Darnell under heavy rain that smelled of wet pine and old asphalt, driving past boarded-up stores and the skeletal frame of the school against the evening sky, and she felt the old ache in her chest when she saw the caution tape fluttering like pale ribbons across the entrance. She signed in with a weary deputy and descended into the unearthed chamber, with only the beam of her flashlight cutting the gloom, her boots crunching on old gravel and broken tiles, the air thick with mold and the metallic tang of rust. And when her light swept across the nearest filing cabinet, she saw that the drawers were pried open and many folders were missing, torn labels revealing only fragments of names. But there in the far corner sat the small locked box, black with age, which she carefully lifted and turned over in her hands, noticing initials carved into the underside TC. And for a moment she felt the hair on her arms rise, as if the room itself had drawn a breath. She pried open the box with her knife, and found inside a leather-bound journal with pages yellowed and brittle, the handwriting neat and slanted, and as she flipped to the first entry the words made her throat tighten. "They told us we would learn better down here, but I don't think this is about learning. I think they are changing something inside us." Followed by an uneven scrawl. "I saw someone in the mirror who wasn't me." Sarah exhaled slowly, her pulse thudding, and as she turned another page, she found dates and short passages describing nightly sessions, lights too bright, a voice behind the mirror giving commands, and then one entry that made her blood run cold. "Teacher says we won't go home, but last night I saw him talking to someone in a gray suit, and the man in the gray suit pointed straight at me." She closed the journal quickly as the room seemed to press in around her. Somewhere above she thought she heard a creak of movement, though the building was empty. And when she climbed back to the surface the rain had stopped, but a pale mist crawled through the schoolyard. She stood staring at the dark tree line at the edge of the property, and felt sure she saw a figure standing there watching, too still to be natural, its face hidden by shadow, and when she blinked it was gone, leaving only the whisper of wind in the pines and the distant wail of a freight train. She clutched the journal to her chest, knowing this was no ordinary record, that something larger and older had touched this place, and as she headed to her car, she realized the lock on her driver's door had been scratched, fresh metal gleaming in the mist, as though someone had tried to get inside while she was underground. Her heart pounded as she slid into the seat and turned the ignition, the journal on the passenger side like a living thing. And for the first time, she wondered if reopening this case was a mistake or the only path left to the truth. Because somewhere in those pages and somewhere in this town lay the answer, not just to Thomas Caldwell's downfall, but maybe to her brother's fate. Yet in that moment, as the headlights lit the fog, she noticed faint footprints leading away from her car into the darkness of the woods, footprints that did not match the boots of any worker or deputy. And she felt a sudden chill that went deeper than the night air. And then her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number containing only 5 words. "Stop digging or lose more." And the screen went black before she could reply, leaving her alone in the quiet with the echo of those words and the image of that shadow still burning in her mind. If this story gripped you, hit like, share your theory in the comments, and subscribe for more mysteries. What do you think was really happening beneath that school? Who do you think sent that message? Stay tuned for part 2. ChatGPT. Sarah barely slept that night, the journal resting on her nightstand like a coiled serpent, its fragile pages still whispering in her mind as the rain tapped at the motel window and the neon sign outside buzzed like an insect trapped in glass. She stared at the ceiling, replaying the message on her phone, wondering who could have sent it and how they knew she was here. By morning, her eyes were bloodshot, but her resolve had hardened. She drove back to the sheriff's office under a dull gray sky and requested access to archived records from 1991. The clerk, a man in his 60s with thick glasses, gave her a reluctant look and muttered about clearance levels before shuffling into a back room, returning with a cardboard box smelling of mildew and ink. Inside, she found brittle attendance sheets, letters from parents demanding answers, and a report stamped confidential that mentioned Thomas Caldwell's sudden removal without elaboration, only a note in the margin. Federal interest C. Correspondence file. But that file was missing. Sarah felt a cold spark of anger. She asked the clerk if anyone else had been through the archives lately, and he hesitated before saying a man from upstate came by last week. No name given, wearing a gray suit, and Sarah felt her breath catch because the journal mentioned that same figure. She left the office with the box and drove to the edge of town where the old Price family home still stood, sagging and overgrown, hoping someone might remember Daniel Price or why his family vanished. The door was boarded, but the back entrance yielded with a shove. Inside smelled of dust and old newspapers. She moved carefully, her flashlight sweeping over peeling wallpaper and children's drawings still pinned to a wall. She found a stack of unopened letters in a kitchen drawer addressed to Daniel's mother from the county school board, each stamped "Return to Sender," and one envelope with no return address containing a single sheet of paper. "We regret to inform you your son cannot be released until assessment is complete." The wording sent a shiver through her. She photographed everything, then heard a floorboard creak upstairs. She froze, listening. Another creak, slower this time. She called out, but no answer came, only the faint sound of movement retreating. She climbed the stairs cautiously, every step groaning, until she reached a narrow hallway lined with closed doors. She opened the first and found only dust and broken furniture. The second contained a closet with old coats. The third was locked from the inside. She knocked. Silence, then a faint rustle as if paper sliding across wood. She forced the door with her shoulder, the lock snapping, and found an empty room except for a single notebook on the floor open to a page that read in trembling handwriting, "Do not trust the mirrors." Sarah crouched to pick it up, and the floor beneath her vibrated softly, as if machinery far below was stirring. She straightened and backed out, heart racing. She left the house quickly and returned to her car, noticing a dark sedan parked 2 houses down, engine idling, tinted windows. As soon as she started her engine, the sedan pulled away slowly, keeping its distance, but following as she drove toward the motel. Sarah took an abrupt turn onto a dirt road leading into the woods. The sedan hesitated, then followed. She accelerated, tires spitting gravel, branches scraping the sides of her car, until she reached a fork and killed her headlights, coasting into the shadows. The sedan passed by unaware, disappearing into the distance. She exhaled, shaking, and checked the journal again, flipping to later entries, where the handwriting became erratic. "The teacher says it is for our own good. He says the others will forget soon. But I remember the hum. I remember the cold chair and the man in the gray suit telling him to hurry. She felt bile rise in her throat. These weren't just disciplinary sessions. Something systematic was happening. Something sanctioned. Back at the motel, she spread out the documents and cross-referenced names, finding that several students from that year later appeared in sealed juvenile transfer files, their destinations unknown, a pattern forming like a bruise beneath the surface. She called an old contact in Atlanta, a journalist named Cole who owed her favors, and asked him to dig into any federal programs operating in rural Georgia during 199091, laughed nervously and said, "You always did like poking the bear," but promised to call back. As night fell, Sarah drove once more to the school site, the mist rising again from the pines. She slipped under the tape with her flashlight and returned to the hatch, this time prying deeper into the chamber, finding a second doorway hidden behind a false wall. She forced it open to reveal a narrow passage sloping down, air growing colder, walls marked with chalk symbols, and at the end a heavy door, with a faded government seal. Her hands trembled as she turned the corroded handle, the hinges groaning, revealing a room lined with metal chairs facing a bank of two-way mirrors. Overhead lights flickered to life, as if triggered by her movement, casting harsh glare on rows of broken restraints bolted to the chairs. On a table lay reels of audio tape, labeled with numbers. She picked one up and noticed faint fingerprints in dried dust, and then her phone vibrated violently. A call from an unknown number. She answered with a whisper, and a voice, low and rasping, said, "You're standing where you shouldn't." She demanded to know who it was, but only static answered, followed by a faint childlike giggle. Her hand tightened on the phone as she spun around. Sure, she saw movement beyond the mirrors, a shadow that retreated just as quickly. She grabbed one of the tapes and the journal and backed out, heart pounding. But before she could climb the stairs, a beam of light swept over her. From above, heavy boots on the ladder, a voice calling down, "Detective Bennett, you need to come up now." It was the sheriff, but his tone was strained, angry. She ascended slowly to find him flanked by two men in dark suits, one of whom wore gray, his expression unreadable. The sheriff said, "This site is closed. You've been instructed to stay clear." Sarah held her ground and asked who the men were. The one in gray stepped forward and smiled faintly. "We're here to preserve history," he said, ice cold. "And you're interfering." She felt the urge to reach for her badge, but something in his gaze stopped her. He lowered his voice. "People forget for a reason, detective," and then nodded to the sheriff, who looked down ashamed. Sarah's mind raced. She stepped back toward her car, clutching the evidence, and the man in gray called after her softly, "Be careful what you remember." She drove off into the night, shaken, headlights carving the darkness. The journal opened beside her to a final entry she hadn't noticed before. "They say some of us will be released, but not me. I heard them say I saw too much, and the teacher promised to keep the secret." The words blurred as her eyes stung, and in the rearview mirror, she thought she saw the dark sedan again far behind, pacing her, growing closer, until her phone buzzed with another message from the unknown number. "We see you." And then the signal died. The road ahead empty except for fog and trees. Yet she felt a presence in the car with her, unseen, and knew this was only the beginning. If this story gripped you, hit like, share your theory in the comments, and subscribe for. Sarah barely noticed the miles slipping under her tires as she pushed deeper into the night, the glow of her dashboard casting a faint green light over her clenched hands, the fog swallowing the road ahead until her headlights struck the weathered sign of a closed rest stop. She pulled in and killed the engine, listening to the tick of cooling metal and the distant cry of some night bird, her heart hammering as she replayed the man in gray's words. She opened the tape recorder she'd taken from the chamber and fed in one of the reels, the machine whirring to life with a faint hiss before a voice crackled through, young, terrified. "Mr. Caldwell says we have to listen. He says if we don't learn it right, they won't let us go." Then a pause, muffled crying, and another voice deeper calm. "Relax, you're safe here. Do you want to remember your parents or not?" Sarah felt her skin crawl. She played on, hearing snippets of commands, the hum of electrical equipment, the sudden metallic scrape as if a chair dragged across concrete. She stopped the tape, staring out into the woods beyond the rest stop, where the mist shifted like something moving. She grabbed her phone and called Cole, whispering urgently. He answered with a groggy voice. "Sarah, do you know what time it is?" She told him about the tapes, about the men in suits, about the journal entries, and Cole swore softly, then said he'd found something, a defunct federal program known as Project Rhetoric that operated in rural schools under the guise of remedial education, record sealed under national security. They experimented with memory retention techniques, Sarah, not all of them legal. His words chilled her. She asked if he could dig further. He hesitated. "These files are redacted to hell. Someone doesn't want them seen." Then his voice dropped. "Be careful, if they're still watching you." And the line went dead, static buzzing in her ear before silence. Sarah shoved the recorder into her bag and started the car, heading back toward Darnell. But as she drove, she noticed headlights appearing behind her again, the dark sedan returning. She accelerated, weaving through the back roads until she reached the edge of the woods, where the Price house stood silhouetted against the faint moonlight. She parked behind a thicket and watched, sure she saw a faint light moving in an upstairs window. She crept toward the house, leaves crunching underfoot, the air damp and smelling of moss and old wood. Inside the house the air was colder than before. She heard faint whispering, a child's voice repeating, "Not the mirrors, not the mirrors." She followed the sound to the locked room, the notebook still on the floor, but now a new page was exposed, fresh and glistening. "They're still in the tunnels. They never left." Her pulse spiked. She turned at a sound behind her and saw a shadow dart across the hallway, too quick to follow. She raced after it, down the stairs and out the back into the dark yard where she stumbled over something half buried in the dirt. She dug with her hands and uncovered a rusted keyring, one key marked with an engraving, East Wing Access. She stared at it, breath coming fast, then froze as footsteps crunched on gravel nearby. She ducked behind an old shed, peering out to see two figures in dark suits moving toward the house with flashlights, one of them the man in gray, his voice calm and cold. "Search everything. She was here." Sarah slipped away through the brush, branches tearing at her jacket, until she reached her car and sped off, heart pounding. She drove straight to the school site, now deserted, moonlight spilling over the caution tape. She unlocked the east wing hatch with the rusted key and descended, determined to find what they were hiding. Deeper into the tunnel past the mirror room, she found another passage sealed by a metal grate. She forced it open and followed the stale air into a cavernous chamber lined with shelves of old reel-to-reel tapes and boxes marked with numbers. She shone her light on one box labeled with Daniel Price's name. Inside were photographs of him hooked up to electrodes, eyes wide with fear, and documents describing progress in cognitive restructuring. Her stomach twisted. Then she noticed a second box with initials MB, her brother's initials. Her hand shook as she opened it and found only a single reel labeled Session 7. She didn't want to, but she had to know. She threaded the reel into the player and pressed play. The tape crackled, and then she heard his voice, younger, frightened. "I want to go home," followed by the calm voice of a man, maybe Caldwell. "Not yet, Michael. We need you to try again." Sarah's vision blurred with tears. She covered her mouth to stop a sob. Then a scraping noise echoed in the chamber. She spun around, light darting across the darkness, and saw a tall silhouette watching from the far end of the tunnel. She called out, "Who's there?" But it didn't answer, only took a step forward, then another, the sound of its footsteps echoing too slow, too deliberate. Sarah backed toward the exit, clutching the reel and journal. But before she reached the ladder, the man in gray's voice came from above. "Detective Bennett, don't do this." She froze, light from above blinding her as figures began to descend. She turned and ran deeper into the tunnel, the shadow figure now gone, only the hum of unseen machinery growing louder. She burst through another doorway into a long hallway lined with cells, each containing only a chair and restraints, and at the end of the hall a metal door with a window. She peered through and saw a dark room filled with old monitors, one still glowing faintly, showing static, and then a blurred image of children in those chairs, chanting words she couldn't make out. Her breath caught as the screen flickered and a face appeared, pale and hollow-eyed, whispering, "Sarah." She staggered back, hitting the wall, and then the door to the monitor room clicked and began to open from the inside, a beam of light spilling out. She raised her flashlight, heart racing, as the door creaked wide and someone stepped out, wearing tattered clothing, eyes blinking against the light, lips trembling as they spoke. "They never let me leave." Sarah's mind reeled. She took a cautious step forward. "Daniel Price," she whispered, and the figure nodded slowly, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. But before she could speak again, the sound of boots and voices echoed down the tunnel, the man in gray shouting, "Seal it off." Daniel grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "They're coming. They'll take you too." And behind them came a distant rumble, as if the tunnel itself were shifting. Sarah pulled Daniel toward the far corridor, clutching the reel, the journal, her mind burning with questions and terror. As dust rained from the ceiling and a harsh light cut through the dark, she heard the man in gray call out one last time, "You don't understand what you've opened." And then the tunnel shook violently as a metal gate slammed down between them, cutting her and Daniel off from the exit, leaving them trapped in the echoing dark with only the dim glow of the monitors and the low hum that was growing louder by the second. If this story gripped you, hit like, share your theory in the comments, and subscribe for more mysteries. What do you think Project Rhetoric really was? Could Daniel hold the key to the truth? Stay tuned for Part 4. ChatGPT. The tunnel shuddered as dust cascaded from the ceiling, Sarah gripping Daniel's arm and forcing herself to breathe through the rising panic. The gate that had slammed down behind them reverberated with heavy blows from the other side, muffled shouts of the men in suits echoing through the narrow hall. Daniel's voice trembled as he said, "They never stop, they only wait." His eyes darting toward the darkened corridor ahead, and Sarah could feel the faint vibration under her feet, that distant hum swelling into something almost like a heartbeat. She pushed forward, leading Daniel deeper, her flashlight beam cutting through thick cobwebs and revealing more of those chalk markings etched into the walls, symbols she didn't recognize, but which seemed arranged like directions. At a fork she hesitated, listening, then chose the path sloping upward, the air turning cooler, the scent of damp earth giving way to something metallic and sharp. They reached a rusted service door and forced it open into a chamber filled with filing cabinets and broken screens. The glow from a single emergency light, flickering over rows of shelves stacked with reels, folders, and photographs. Sarah swept her light over a table and froze at the sight of a manila file marked MB. She snatched it up, her hands shaking as she opened it and found only a few sheets. Her brother's school photo clipped to a report that read, "Subject failed to integrate. Transfer to holding Sector 3 pending." But no further pages, no conclusion, only a scrawled note at the bottom. "Observe for residual effects." Her vision blurred as her throat tightened. Daniel reached out and touched the page softly, his cracked voice breaking. "I remember him. He wouldn't stop asking questions. They took him away one night and told us to forget." Sarah felt anger surge through her exhaustion, gripping the file, as if by sheer will she could pull her brother back through time. She asked Daniel how he had survived all these years. His eyes darted to the shadows. "They moved us between places, underground. Sometimes they let us out to see if we remembered. I hid when they came for me last." The sound of metal tearing echoed from behind, the pursuers breaking through. Sarah scanned the room and saw another hatch in the corner, partially obscured by debris. She dragged it aside and yanked the hatch open, a cold draft sweeping up from below. Daniel hesitated. "Not down there. That's where they did it." Sarah met his gaze. "Do you want to stay here?" And he shook his head violently, following her into the darkness, the ladder creaking under their weight. They descended into a cylindrical tunnel lined with pipes and cables, the hum louder now, almost a voice murmuring under the sound. At the bottom they found a narrow passage leading to a chamber with the huge machine dormant in the center, cables snaking into the walls, chairs bolted in a circle around it, each with rusted restraints. Sarah's flashlight caught on. Faded government stencils. "Property of Educational Advancement Unit." Daniel flinched, covering his ears as if hearing something. "It's still here," he whispered. Sarah moved closer to the machine, noticing a control panel with cracked dials and a single lever locked in place. Beside it a clipboard with names, each one crossed out except two. Daniel Price and Michael Bennett. Her hand trembled as she traced the letters of her brother's name. They kept him alive. She breathed. Daniel shook his head slowly. Not alive, not like before. And Sarah felt a wave of nausea as she imagined what that meant. Footsteps echoed from the tunnel behind them. The beam of a flashlight cutting the dark. The man in gray emerging with the sheriff and two others, their weapons raised, his calm voice filling the chamber. Detective, step away. You don't know what you're touching. Sarah stood her ground, holding the file and the reel. Where's my brother? She demanded. The man in gray's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He was part of something necessary. Memories can be dangerous. You wouldn't understand. Rage flared in her chest. I understand enough, she snapped. You built a machine to break children's minds. The man in gray took a step forward, hands out in mock placation. We were trying to help them adapt, to protect them from things they could not know. Sarah backed toward the panel, feeling Daniel clutch her arm. The sheriff's eyes flicked between them, guilt etched on his face. Sarah's fingers found the lever. What happens if I pull this? She asked. The man in gray's eyes hardened. Don't. His voice sharp now. You'll bring it all back. She met his gaze. Maybe that's what the world needs. And before they could stop her, she yanked the lever down with all her strength. The machine groaned, lights flaring to life, the hum rising into a deafening roar. Daniel screamed, clutching his head. The men staggered, shouting, as the walls vibrated and the monitors flickered on. One screen showing fragments of old sessions, children's faces, another showing Sarah's brother sitting in the chair, eyes wide, lips moving as if whispering something. Sarah reached for the screen, tears spilling, the chamber filled with a low voice layered with echoes. Sarah. The sound not from the speakers, but from everywhere. She felt a strange warmth in her chest, a flood of images not her own. A park, a ball game, Michael's laughter, then darkness, then cold hands. She stumbled, gasping, Daniel gripping her shoulder. Turn it off, he cried, but the lever was stuck, sparks flying from the panel. The man in gray lunged forward, grabbing her arm. You don't know what you're unleashing, he hissed, but Sarah wrenched free. The machine's roar reaching a crescendo, and then a sudden blast of light erupted, throwing them all off their feet, silence crashing down in its wake. Sarah lay on the cold floor, ears ringing, vision swimming. As she forced herself up, she saw the chamber empty except for herself and Daniel, the machine dead, wire smoking, the hatch above hanging open with no sign of the man in gray or the sheriff. Daniel groaned, clutching his head. They're gone, he whispered. Sarah looked at the clipboard, her brother's name still there, uncrossed. A cold thought creeping into her mind. Had the machine released memories, or something else, into the world? She helped Daniel to his feet, both of them staggering toward the ladder, emerging into the pale dawn. The school site eerily quiet, no cars, no deputies, just the mist curling through the trees. Sarah clutched the file and the reel to her chest, knowing she had pieces of the truth, but not the whole picture. She turned to Daniel. We can go public, we can tell them. He shook his head slowly, eyes haunted. They won't let us, they never let it end. Sarah stared at the horizon where the sun was struggling through the clouds, her heart aching with loss and fury. Yet somewhere, deep inside, a flicker of hope burned. She had found someone who remembered. She had pulled something hidden into the light, and maybe that was enough to start a fire no one could stop. As she walked back to her car, she noticed a scrap of paper caught on the windshield. She unfolded it with trembling fingers, the handwriting neat and slanted. This isn't the end. Her eyes scanned the tree line one last time, and for a fleeting second, she thought she saw a familiar figure watching from the shadows, tall, still, a face she almost recognized. But when she blinked, the figure was gone, the mist closing in like a secret, and Sarah felt the weight of the file in her hand. Sarah spent the next 3 days hiding out in a motel far from Darnell, curtains always drawn. The journal and reels spread across the bed like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't stop rearranging. The television on low volume only to drown out her racing thoughts. Every few hours she would check the window, expecting that dark sedan or the man in gray's cold eyes. But the parking lot remained empty except for a few trucks and an old couple unloading groceries. Daniel paced the room like a ghost, his thin frame casting long shadows in the neon light, sometimes mumbling to himself as if speaking to voices only he could hear. She had convinced him to stay because his memories were the only map she had. But every time she pressed for details, his face would tighten and he would shake his head violently, whispering, "Something's come back wrong." She knew the machine in the chamber had done something to her, to him, to everyone who had been trapped in those tunnels. She could feel fragments slipping into her mind like stray signals, flashes of other people's memories, a chalkboard, a humming light, Caldwell's calm voice repeating phrases she didn't understand. She would wake in the night drenched in sweat, convinced she could still hear the low hum from the machine beneath the earth. One evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, she opened the journal again and noticed for the first time a folded page near the back. She unfolded it carefully, the paper brittle, and read words that sent a chill through her. "They say he was taken to Sector 3, but I saw him after. I saw Michael in the mirror, and he told me not to speak." Sarah's breath caught, the memory of that monitor flickering with her brother's image burning in her mind. She grabbed her laptop and began searching through declassified facility maps, cross-referencing old federal building codes, until she found a reference to a Sector 3 located beneath an abandoned agricultural station 30 miles north. She showed Daniel, and his eyes widened with recognition. "I remember that place. The trucks would drive us at night." Sarah didn't hesitate. She packed everything into a duffel bag, started the car, and drove into the night with Daniel silent in the passenger seat, the road winding through pine forests thick with mist, every shadow a threat, every passing car a potential tale. They reached the station near midnight, the moon high and cold, the building sagging under years of neglect, windows broken, vines curling over rusted fences. She cut the headlights and coasted to a stop, stepping out into air that smelled of rust and wet earth, her flashlight beam dancing across faded letters on a crumbling sign. "Sector 3 Research Annex." Daniel shivered, gripping her arm. "It's still here." They circled to the back, where they found a heavy metal door chained shut. Sarah used bolt cutters, the chain snapping with a sharp crack that echoed into the night. Inside, the building was a maze of corridors lined with peeling paint and collapsed ceiling tiles, the silence oppressive, only their footsteps and the drip of unseen water breaking it. Deep in the corridor, they found a staircase descending into darkness. Daniel's breathing quickened. "They used to take us down here." Sarah led the way, flashlight beam trembling, the stairs opening into a cavernous space filled with rows of cots, overturned tables, and chalkboards covered in equations. She felt the hair on her neck rise as she moved deeper, the air thick and stale, until they reached a locked gate, beyond which a faint light flickered. She jimmied the lock with her knife, metal groaning, the gate swinging inward to reveal a narrow hall with doors on either side. She pushed one open and froze. Inside was a small observation room with walls of two-way mirrors, monitors stacked high, many shattered, but one still glowing faintly, displaying static, and then a flash of an image, her brother's face, older now, eyes distant, lips moving as if reciting something. Sarah's knees weakened. "Michael," she whispered, pressing her hand to the glass. Daniel staggered back, clutching his head. "He's still here." Sarah turned, scanning the room, noticing a file cabinet half open. Inside, she found reels labeled with dates years after Michael's disappearance. She threaded one into a dusty machine, static filling the air. Then a voice, older, weary. "They don't let me forget. They want me to teach now." Sarah's heart pounded as she heard her brother's voice continue. "If someone hears this, don't come down here, don't." The tape cut off abruptly, replaced by a deep mechanical hum rising through the floor. The lights in the corridor flickered. Daniel grabbed her arm. "They know we're here." Footsteps echoed from somewhere above, heavy and hurried. Sarah yanked the tape from the machine, shoving it into her bag, and pulled Daniel toward another door. Inside, they found a stairwell leading even deeper, the hum growing louder, the walls vibrating faintly. They emerged into a circular chamber dominated by a larger version of the machine from the school, cables snaking across the floor like veins, monitors lining the walls showing feeds of empty corridors, and then, suddenly, one monitor showing a man strapped to a chair, head shaved, eyes open but unfocused, whispering something. Sarah moved closer, her breath catching as she recognized the shape of his face, the curve of his jaw. "Michael," she breathed, tears springing to her eyes. Daniel stepped back, shaking his head. "He's part of it now." Sarah reached for the control panel, hands trembling, the same kind of lever as before, but this one marked with faded red letters. Primary release. Footsteps pounded closer, the man in gray's voice shouting, "Step away, detective." Sarah turned, the panel under her hand. "Tell me what you did to him," she demanded. The man in gray appeared in the doorway, flanked by armed men, his voice eerily calm. "He volunteered after we realized what he could do. He's helping us guide the others." Sarah's stomach twisted. "You're lying," she spat. The man in gray took a step forward, lowering his weapon. "If you pull that lever, you will destroy what remains of his mind. You'll release everything we've kept contained." Sarah's eyes darted to the monitor, Michael's lips moving as if speaking her name, the hum deepening to a low rumble. She felt every memory of her brother flash through her mind. The laughter, the night he disappeared, the endless years of not knowing. Daniel gripped her arm. "Sarah, please." His voice breaking, the man in gray raising his hand. "Don't do this. You can walk away." The chamber seemed to close in, her fingers tightening around the lever, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "I can't leave him like this." And then, with a sob, she pulled the lever down, alarms blaring, the machine roaring to life, the monitors flickering through images, children, teachers, experiments. Endless corridors. Daniel screamed, covering his ears. The men staggered, shouting, as the chamber shook violently. Sarah's eyes locked on the monitor as Michael's face lifted, eyes focusing for the first time, lips forming a single word, "Run." And then the screen went white as a shockwave ripped through the chamber, throwing everyone to the ground, the hum rising to a deafening pitch before cutting off into absolute silence. Sarah lay dazed, the air filled with the acrid smell of burned circuits. Daniel pulling her to her feet, the machine dark and dead. Sarah drove without stopping for hours, the sun climbing higher, but feeling dim, her eyes burning from exhaustion yet unable to rest. Daniel slumped in the passenger seat, silent, his thin hands folded in his lap, like he was praying. The road stretched ahead through miles of empty farmland, the kind of places people forgot existed. She couldn't shake the feeling that every passing car held someone watching her, that every shadow on the roadside was a signal or a warning. The bag of tapes and files rattled softly in the back seat with every bump, those reels containing fragments of screams and whispered lessons looping in her mind. She had done what she thought was right, pulling the lever, freeing Michael from that machine. But the deeper she drove into the unknown, the more she wondered if freedom was the right word, because even now his voice echoed inside her, layered with dozens of others, a chorus that would fall silent for hours, then suddenly rise, reciting numbers, instructions, strange phrases she didn't understand. Daniel woke with a start, his eyes darting around as if expecting to be back in the tunnel. "Where are we?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Sarah tightened her grip on the wheel. "Away," she said. "We just have to get away." But she didn't believe it. Deep down, she knew there was no away. She pulled into a small diner on the edge of a town whose name she didn't catch, the neon sign flickering. Inside smelled of coffee and fried onions. A waitress, with tired eyes, poured them both coffee without asking questions. Daniel stared at the menu but didn't read it. Sarah unfolded the file again, scanning the pages for something she had missed. At the bottom of one report, she saw a faint embossed seal she hadn't noticed. She held it up to the light, tracing the letters. Division of Cognitive Retention and Behavioral Control. Beneath it a line of numbers like a code. She copied them onto a napkin. Daniel muttered under his breath, "Sector 4. They always said Sector 4 was worse." Sarah's head snapped up. "Sector 4, she repeated, and Daniel nodded slowly. "It's where they sent the ones who broke, the ones who remembered too much." Her stomach knotted. Was Michael among them now, or was he something else entirely? She stared out the diner window and froze. Across the street a man in a gray suit was standing under a flickering streetlight, not moving, just watching. She blinked and he was gone. A chill rippled through her. She dropped cash on the table, and grabbed Daniel's arm, dragging him out to the car. They sped off down a back road, fields whipping past, Daniel's breathing quickening. "We can't keep running," he said. "They know everything." Sarah gritted her teeth. "Then we fight," she answered, but the words felt hollow. As night fell, they reached a run-down motel by a river, the only sound the distant rush of water. Sarah spread the tapes out again, searching for anything, a pattern, a clue. One reel unmarked drew her attention. She threaded it into the player. Static, and then a voice, soft and deliberate. "If you've come this far, you already know too much. We see you. We hear you." Sarah's skin crawled as the voice continued. "What you freed is not what you lost. He remembers you now, but not himself." Daniel backed away, shaking his head. "Turn it off," he whispered. Sarah stopped the tape, but the words lingered. She sat in silence until dawn, staring at the wall, thinking of Michael's eyes on that screen, the way he spoke her name, the way the machine hummed like it was alive, the way the man in gray warned her about a circle, and she began to wonder if freeing him meant releasing something meant to stay buried. The next day she drove Daniel to a bus station, pressing a roll of bills into his hand. "Disappear," she told him. "Start over somewhere." He looked at her with haunted eyes. "You should do the same," he said, then boarded the bus without looking back. Sarah watched it pull away, feeling a hollow ache in her chest, then returned to her car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She knew she wouldn't stop. She couldn't. She followed the faint leads from the code she had copied, tracing it to a decommissioned research compound in the high desert, the heat rippling across the sand as she approached, alone now. The building crouched like a predator in the shimmering light. Inside she found empty rooms, walls covered with peeling diagrams, fragments of machines like the ones she had already seen, and in the far corner of a dark basement a small table with a single object on it, an old cassette recorder with a note taped to it, "Play me." Her heart pounded as she pressed play, the tape whirring before a familiar voice filled the air. Michael's voice, calm but distant. "Sarah, if you've come this far, you think you've saved me, but I am part of them now, and they are part of me. They cannot be destroyed, only delayed. Listen to me carefully. They will come for you because you carry the pattern now." Sarah staggered back, tears in her eyes, as the voice continued. "I wanted to see you one last time, to remember what I was. But you have to run. You have to bury what you found." The tape clicked off. Silence heavy in the room. Sarah stood trembling, staring at the recorder as if it might speak again. She stepped outside into the blazing sun, the desert stretching endless in every direction, and for a brief moment she felt free, until she heard the faint hum again carried on the hot wind, that same low vibration she had heard in every tunnel, and she turned slowly to see far off on the horizon a line of black vehicles moving across the sand toward her. She looked down at the bag at her hand filled with tapes and files, then back at the approaching line, her mind racing. She whispered to herself, "Not the end," and turned to run toward the jagged hills in the distance, the sun beating down, the wind carrying that impossible hum, the certainty in her chest that whatever she had uncovered, whatever she had freed, was far from finished. And as she ran, she thought she saw a figure standing on a ridge ahead, waiting, tall and still, a shadow against the burning sky, and she couldn't tell if it was Michael or something else entirely. If this story gripped you, hit like, share your theory in the comments, and subscribe for more mysteries. What do you think awaits Sarah in those hills? Is Michael truly himself, or something far darker? Let us know your thoughts.